Welcome to a very special testimony time with me, Doug Harris. But that's not why it's special. It's special because of my guest today, Mr. Luke Jones.
Hi.
Hi, Luke. You know, now you are normally on the other end of that
Yeah,
microphone, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
What's it like sitting there instead of sitting in the control room?
Very scary.
Well, you're here for a reason, because we really want to get your testimony from you of what God has done in your life, which is pretty special for you. So let's begin at the beginning. Early life, was it a Christian home? How did you respond? What was Sunday school like? Were you a good kid? Well, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a family with my mum and dad, and I had to, well, at the time I didn't have a sister, but she was going to be born a bit later. I grew up with a Christian family. My mum was a Christian. My dad kind of believed in God, kind of didn't. He wasn't too sure. I went to church regularly with my mum, Sunday school, everything. I had a good life, really. Lived in a one-bedroom flat at the time, which wasn't great, but it was still something. But and then a few years went by when my sister was born, so had a good life. Very, very close family, very close-knit family. Yeah.
And you were a perfect kid.
No, I wouldn't say perfect. I had my moments.
Yeah, I think all children have their moments, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, let's move on. You had that background. Okay, as you say, it may not have been the most salubrious place, the biggest place to live in, but it was good, good family life. Lots of love, lots of care. And then you get some devastating news when you're 8 years old. Now, I can't imagine what it was like to hear the news. Tell us what you were told and how you responded to it.
Well, firstly, I'll point out that I just became a Christian at the time. Basically, what happened, I started having these pains in my right shoulder, in my humerus bone, and what happened then afterwards, I had to go to my GP. I told them about the pains. They put it down to muscular pain, and that the pains would just go away within a couple of days, which it didn't. It only got worse. So then I went to a specialist. They took me to a specialist, and that's when they did an X-ray, because by then the pains were getting really bad. I was awake most of the nights, really crying to my mum, and that's when they did an X-ray, and they found like a big tumour growing on my right shoulder. And that's when they had to do a biopsy. And it was December 1997 when, it was after the biopsy, I went straight back to the hospital. And that's when the doctors told me that I had osteosarcoma, which is a form of bone cancer. And well, at the time they told my parents. They didn't actually tell me. They had to take me away, and because at 8 years old they couldn't really tell me that. And that's when they told my parents that I then had to have medication. I had to have a strong dosage of chemotherapy, and that's what...
How did that sort of, how did you respond to that? I mean, I know adults that find that very difficult, but you know, an 8-year-old, you know, obviously full of joy and, you know, and lots of life to live yet. How did you respond to all that medication?
At first, it didn't really hit me, because at the time I thought cancer, I didn't really know what cancer was. I didn't know how serious it was. I just thought it was like having a cold or flu. You could take some medication, it would all be gone within a couple of days. I didn't realise the seriousness of it until I started treatment. And I also remember at the time, because I'd just become a Christian, I always said to my mum, why did God allow this to happen to me? Because I thought at that age becoming a Christian meant that nothing bad would ever happen to you, which isn't the case.
Right.
And and my mum was always a strong Christian. She always said to me to always pray, to always think positive and get close to God. And she gave me this verse as well, that I shall not die, but live and proclaim the works of the Lord, a bit later on into my treatment. And that was the verse I stood by throughout that year.
So first of all, you had lots of chemotherapy and fairly heavy chemotherapy.
Yeah, very heavy.
And that, I mean, that affected you in all sorts of other ways as well, doesn't it?
It did. I mean, the doctor said that I would have hair loss. I would go bald. I'd be very weak as well because it destroys all your cells in your body, not just the cancerous cells, but the good cells. And at the time, they had to take out my baby cells because...
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to be showing some pictures as we go
Yeah.
through this of you, and you look so handsome there, Luke.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's nurse just giving. I think she's checking my heartbeat there. But as you can see, there's a tube sticking out there,
Yes.
which is called a Hickman line, where the chemotherapy went into my body. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
me there being bald. That's about a few months into the treatment there.
I mean, how did you feel about yourself at that point?
Yeah.
You know, bald. You know, did that cause problems for you? Did that begin to have problems, or were you able to cope
It
with
didn't
that?
really bother me, to be honest. I mean, at the time, I looked forward to being bald. I don't know why. Yeah, I just wanted to be bald. I liked the thought of it. And also, because I had to have time off school, it was kind of fun in a way.
So you had all this chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And what was the next stage after that?
Well, I had to have operations as well. One of the the chemotherapy was there to shrink the tumour. That was what they was going to do first. And once it shrunk a bit, they then had to take out my humerus bone and replace it with a metal bone.
Right.
And they did that. Then I had to have more treatment. But that wasn't the be-all and end-all, really. That didn't end there because the cancer had then spread to my lungs. I can't remember how many nodules. It was like 47 nodules in total. And it wasn't just in one place. It was all spread over. But the chemotherapy got rid of most of the cells.
The picture on the screen at the moment is this one of this chemist shop. Now, that isn't your local chemist shop. Those are the medicines that you had to take every day.
Every single day.
And you told me just before we went on air, you couldn't swallow tablets.
No, I had a great fear of swallowing tablets. I thought that I would choke or something bad would happen, so I had to have it in liquid form.
Right.
Which was even worse because the flavouring of medicine isn't nice. So, and especially at that age, taking all that was quite heavy. I mean, there was medication there for mouth ulcers, some for magnesium because my levels were low. There was some for anti-sickness. It was all sorts of things, really.
So how long did that chemo and those operations go on for? Was it a year?
Chemotherapy went on for about 7 months.
Yes.
Operations, I'd say a good 8 months at least. I had about 7 operations in total. One to put the Hickman line in, then take the Hickman line out. One for taking out my humerus bone, replacing it with a metal. And also I had to have, because I was just going to say about my baby cells, they had to be taken out because the chemotherapy would have destroyed the baby cells and my blood count, all my levels in my body would be zero.
Yeah.
It would take longer for me to recover. So that's what they had to do before the chemo started.
And after all of that, did they feel that they'd got everything? Did they feel it went into recession? I mean, did you have a period after that where it seemed things might be okay?
Yeah, well, I mean, not really, but it was in August, it was, after my huge block of chemotherapy that things started to go okay-ish. It wasn't great. It wasn't what the doctors were hoping for, but it was good. The doctors had then said that the chemotherapy didn't get rid of all my cells in my lungs. There was some that was still there that they couldn't get rid of. And they just told my parents to take me home and enjoy me because they couldn't, in their opinion, they thought the cells would come alive within 4 or 5 months.
Right.
And there was nothing more they could do because there was so many of them.
So basically, they certainly weren't giving you a lot longer to live at that
Not really,
point.
no. I mean, the condition was, and I found this out later, it was terminal. I wasn't expected to live.
You're a walking miracle,
I
aren't
know.
you? What, at that point, and of course it was in many ways going to get worse, but at that point, what was your relationship like with the Lord? You say you'd come to the Lord just before this, and yes, you had the obvious question, why does God allow it? But were you able to work through that? Were you able to develop your relationship with the Lord?
Definitely, because at that age, I was a really strong Christian. I always stood on the Bible physically and stood on the Word, always thinking positive, proclaiming the works of the Lord, that I'm not going to die and live. And I must point this out. At the beginning, before my treatment, when my mum found out that I'd got cancer, she was, naturally she was devastated.
Yes.
And she was praying to God that I would get better. And I think it must have been a couple of weeks later, after my diagnosis, she had this dream, and it's a really powerful dream, that she was walking through this cemetery. She could see the spirits of dead children there, and next to the graves were the parents tending over their graves. And in a dream, she was looking for me, and she came across this stone with names of people who died on there, but she couldn't find my name. Right. And then she woke up, and she felt a strong presence that's telling her that I wouldn't die, that I'm going to make it, no matter how bad it looks, that I'm going to get through this. And that's what got my mum through it. That's when she suddenly realised that this was God telling her, and God never lies, and she's going to believe that.
I mean, isn't God good to encourage her in that? Because I guess it must have been very difficult for her looking on. Yeah. And maybe sometimes it's even more difficult for the person looking on than it is for the person going through it.
It is, in a way, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine how my mother must have felt, because I didn't really feel fear at that stage. I didn't really understand what it was all about. But my mum, she never used to show her feelings in front of me. She always kept it hidden. I mean, the memories I have of my mum was being strong, always strong. Even my dad as well. I mean, he became a Christian as well, and at the time, and both of them were always praying with me.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Great. As you say, things got okay-ish in the August. Yeah. Never really perfect. Still expecting you not to live too long. And although obviously you didn't die, things got a lot worse.
Yeah, they did.
Tell us what began to happen.
It was in September '98. We was due to go away on holiday when I noticed I had pains under my right armpit. I immediately recognised the pains, because I knew in my heart of hearts it was cancer that had returned. I told my parents about it. We went to the hospital. They gave me a CT scan and an X-ray, MRI as well, to check everything. Then they gave the results to my mum and dad. They didn't give it to me, that my cancer had in fact returned and there was nothing more they could do. They didn't tell me this because obviously we was going on holiday. The next week they didn't want to worry me. So after the holiday, we all went back to the hospital, went back to my specialist, and that's when he said he made the decision that he's going to amputate my arm. And I can remember what it was like. I mean, I remember breaking down in that hospital room, not over the thought of amputating my arm, but just of the thought that the cancer had returned. I remember just crying and crying because I didn't want to die. I was terrified of dying. That's the worst. And then he said, we're going to amputate your arm. I didn't know what the word amputate meant. And he put it logically to me that we're going to have to cut off your arm. But, I mean, he said that, but it wasn't as though I was going to get better from it. It was just to prolong the cancer from growing.
Spreading, yes.
Yeah. And that's what happened. I think it was September the 30th, '98, when I had the operation.
I mean, I just can't imagine that. Yeah. I have to say, I mean, so you went into the operation probably with a little bit of fear and trepidation. Yeah. What was it like when you woke up?
As though nothing had happened, really. I mean, I could still feel my arm as though it was there because my nerves were sending signals to my brain saying that it's still there. It didn't really hit me until I went home and I had to learn to do everything again. It was like being born again in a way. I had to learn everything, learn how to get washed and dressed, learn how to write, because I was right-handed before. I had to learn again with the left. I had to learn everything. That itself was a nightmare, really, because it took about a good year, I'd say, of actually getting used to things. And of course, going back to school as well, seeing my friends with me having only one arm, that was quite scary. Because I remember thinking, are they going to accept me for it now? And all that.
Because now you've got several things coming into play here at this
Yeah.
point. I mean, did they, after they'd done the amputation, did they actually give you hope that you were going to live, or were you still expected to die?
Well, after the operation, they gave me radiotherapy because the cells had returned to around about here. So they had to get rid of them cells from spreading to my lungs, and that worked. And then they did a chest X-ray of my cells that was still there, but they hadn't grown further. They just stopped growing for some reason.
Right.
And I had to keep coming back every 6 months because they wasn't too sure. In their eyes, they thought that it's only a matter of time before that comes alive again, really. Yeah.
Here you are without your arm,
Yeah.
and with the certificate. What?
Yeah, I think that was for a disability event.
Right.
I think I must have been playing football, obviously.
Yep.
And I won an award for that. And I think that was a few years after my amputation, when I got these medals. There's me posing. Yeah.
You don't change much, do you?
No, not really.
What? So you had that. You had the physical problem. You
Yeah.
still had this question of whether the cancer was going to return, but I guess you also had a real mental, emotional problem of adapting. Take us through that. I just feel that there will be other people that maybe not have as dramatic, maybe even more dramatic, but will have had these challenges.
Yeah.
Something will have happened
That's
to
it.
them that said, I mean, your whole body image changing. Everything. What was it like to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was when I was 14, 15 years old now. Before it didn't really bother me as much. But because I entered my teenage years, I started recognizing girls a lot more. I started noticing my body more. That I started to become quite angry when I saw all the other guys. They were totally normal. They could do everything, really.
Angry with God?
Angry with life and God. Yeah, I mean, that's when I stopped going to church now. I didn't want to know God anymore. I thought that he'd let me down. And a few months of me not going to church, I started going down this downward spiral of depression, really. And that's when things started to get bad for me, that I stopped doing everything, really. I kind of stopped living. I didn't want to live anymore because of what happened and me just life, really, adapting to one arm. It just wasn't for me.
And downward spiral.
Yeah.
How low did you get? I mean, did you think of suicide? What were you doing in situations like that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start thinking suicidal thoughts at first. I mean, it was mainly self-harming that I did because I used to cut my legs with anything sharp.
So this was something you did on
a regular basis.
And did you feel that helped you?
It did. It kind of got rid of my pain inside my heart, and I felt good about doing it. And it kind of made me feel better, not about myself, but made me feel better that I'm punishing myself because I felt it's what I deserved at the time. And then I started to feel kind of suicidal. Them thoughts just slowly crept into my mind. I remember thinking to myself, would I be better off dead? Because I wanted a girlfriend as well at the time. Would I be single forever?
Yeah.
All that was going through my mind, and I thought, well, if I do kill myself, what's the worst that can happen? I'll be with the Lord. And I did try to kill myself on a few occasions of taking an overdose and trying to cut my wrists and things like that. And then I had to go and see a counsellor. My mum found out. I can't remember how she found out now, but she found out that I'd been self-harming. That's when I had to open up to her. And I went to see a counsellor. it didn't really tend to work at first, the counsellor, because I didn't want to talk about it. In my opinion, it was either you bring my arm back, give my arm back to me, and bring out my confidence more, or I'll kill myself. It's that simple. And I remember being so angry, I just wanted it back now. I even saying to the Lord, I want my arm back. Why have you done this to me? And in my opinion, the counsellor couldn't help me. No one could help me, really, and that's when I pushed everyone away. And then I stopped going to the counsellor because it didn't really help.
And how long did that go on for?
Depression itself went on for a good couple of years.
Okay. You got right down to rock bottom.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to leave you there.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting there smiling now. So obviously you're still not at rock bottom. And you're smiling even after working with us for nearly a year. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. But what actually happened to turn things around for you?
A couple of things happened, really. At first, because my mum had this friend of hers that she's a life coach and a counsellor, and she's a headstrong Christian as well. And we was having this conversation over the phone one night because she was like counselling me in her way. And she said to me, well, I said to her, I just want to kill myself. And she said, what do you think is going to happen if you do kill yourself? And I said, well, I'll be with the Lord. And she said, no, you'll go straight to hell because that's what happens when you take your own life because it's murder. And I thought to myself, well, how can it be murder? I mean, even though it says in the commandment, thou shalt not murder, but I didn't think it meant to yourself as well.
Yes.
And that kind of scared me because I didn't want to kill myself and end up in a worse place than I already was. I wanted to kill myself and end up in a much better place. And that stopped me from doing it, I think. And also, because I was on medication as well, it kind of stopped me thinking them thoughts. And even at the time when I was still self-harming, she prayed for me, and I went to see a pastor, and he prayed for me that every time I'd cut myself that I would feel sick inside me. And a couple of months after them events, I did feel sick about the thought of self-harming. I just couldn't face it, I couldn't think it. I mean, I was shaking all over, my legs were shaking, I was breaking out in sweats, and I couldn't do this. And as for suicidal thoughts, that slowly went out my mind because I started to focus more on God in a way.
You got back to seeking Him,
yeah.
reading His Word again and being
That's
involved
right.
in that.
Yeah. That took a long time though.
Yeah.
It did take a long time to do. And also me not like, whenever friends or family came around, I'd always hide myself away. Because I'd be fearful of the outside world as well for some reason. And the only way to overcome that was to face it, and that's what I did.
And I mean, I think seeing you sitting there now, I think the message is that there is hope.
Yeah.
Yes, there will be the valley of despair,
Yeah.
but there is hope, and certainly you need others
Yeah.
to help you, but you also need the Lord to seek Him and allow Him
That's right.
to minister to you. And you're a living proof of that, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't really want to know God when I was going through depression. I mean, but He is like, in a way, He's like a medicine, His words. They're like, every time you read the Bible, it's like taking a vitamin C tablet or something like that to always feed your imagination, your mind, to help you grow stronger in the Word. And I do admit now, I am a Christian. I do go to church still. I do still have struggles with the Lord. Who doesn't, in a way, I suppose.
Yes.
I mean, but I'm always going to have these issues. But the one thing I always remember is that God saved me for a purpose. There's a purpose in my life that He wants me to do. And I'm eager to find that out, really.
and that's daily living. I mean, I have to say, I mean, when you first came to us, you were very shy, retiring.
Yeah.
I mean, look at you now. Now, do you have, when you go into new situations still,
Yeah.
with your arm, do you have problems over that? Do you think what's going to happen, how they're going to cope with me, what they're going to say?
I mean, what's going to happen is going to happen. No one can change it. I don't worry about it as much. I don't think about it, to be honest. I mean, people do ask me sometimes, what happened to your arm? And I tell them straight. I don't mind sharing sharing it with them. I actually enjoy it, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just don't think about it as much anymore.
Right.
But I mean, there are still some things that I can't do, like walking down the road without my arm on. That's just, I
Right.
wouldn't do that.
No.
I'd have to have it on.
And I mean, I've been amazed that, and I'm sure many of the people watching you now have been actually on the set, and you've put the microphones on, and
Yeah.
I know one of the things I always had a question: could you actually put all the microphones? But you do it. You've learnt to cope
Yeah.
with what you and you seem, as you say, you've still got your struggles, but you seem to be at peace
Yeah.
over that. That you've come, on the whole, to that place of rest, that you are what you are and God's going to use you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I do. Whenever I go down, whenever I think back to what happened, I always think how far I've come and how far I'm going to go in the future. And even when I came here, you know, it was like, wow, it's a great story to have, really. I mean, yeah.
Great, Luke. We've really enjoyed having you. Thank
Yeah.
you for talking with us today. And I trust your message has met with some of you out there that need to know the Lord in the way Luke has found the Lord. Bless you. See you again soon.